And yo, what's outside is within. The mind regulates the hand that masters the pen. The pen is mightier than the sword, but the tongue is mightier still. The stargate to the mind's revealed. The Vortex.
Peace. Cyclonious here with Kevin, with another Real Talk with Kevin episode. And this one is about therapy and mental health in the hood, or the streets, or whatever you want to call it. Alright, so the first question is, why do you think therapy is often looked down upon in the hood/streets?
It's always felt, growing up, being black, there's always a sort of level of parenting that was you had to deal with. So really, I can use the analogy or an example, should I say, of my mum combing my afro when I was young. And it getting a bit rough for me.
Yeah.
And me maybe saying, "Oh, mum," and then getting some licks in their head because you're not supposed to be saying anything.
That's right.
Yeah,
You gotta
so
firm it.
whether it's physical pain and you're not supposed to respond,
Yeah.
or emotional pain,
Yeah.
you were supposed to take it on the chin. And I think there's been this level of conditioning. If you Brainwashed by Tom Burrell, really insightful book, talks about the sort of link between the behaviours we display. We displayed in colonial times on the plantations, and now we had to keep in line on the plantations, or you had to keep your children in line because they'd become victimised or a victim of some sort of cruel practice if they stepped out of line. So moaning and creating a situation emotionally, whether you're upset because of the beating or you got no food, or just being disruptive, maybe in the eyes of the slave master, you had to keep your child in check. So that sort of parallels to today's behaviours. Where parenting, as a consequence of trauma, transgenerational trauma, down that timeline, we still have these practices where we're still keeping our children in check on a certain level. So talking out about a feeling of being emotional was a no-no. It's still a no-no. And there's no plantation master now, but we still have this same practice going on and these same behaviours. So to be able to say, "Oh, I'm in pain, or I feel upset about this," no. We've been conditioned really to still operate in that manner. So seeking help through therapy, especially as a black man, you're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to be virile. There's these sort of this stigma attached to black men, or these stereotypes where you're looked upon as being supposed to operate in a particular manner. I think it's reinforced in the black community amongst men. We treat each other in a particular manner where you're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to be hard, you're supposed to look after your family in a particular manner. That doesn't always happen, and your children. If you're a real black man, I'm not saying, some people might say if you use the N-word, if that word's associated to you as a black person, you may not operate in a typically black fashion where you're looking after all the parts you're supposed to look after. So I think it's just how we've been conditioned over time, and that sort of filtered into the family unit and systemically it's just been passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah. How does generational trauma play a role in how inner city communities view mental health?
Well, I think that was just an example that we talked about. And I think in all areas, the treatment of black men towards black women and vice versa, the treatment of dark-skinned people towards light-skinned people and vice versa, have all got these sort of traumatic elements to it that come from, like I said, in Tom Burrell's book, he talks about it quite succinctly, about that being passed down. So there's a load of different factors that contribute towards us not engaging in therapy or being traumatized in a certain way. So, I mean, there's these sort of societal factors or social phenomenons that people take for granted when it comes to the trauma that black people experience. So imagine in society generally as a whole, you have to deal with, or had to deal with over time, the dehumanization of people, the did I say dehumanization? Then the demonization of people.
Yeah.
Then prejudice, stereotyping, brutalization of a set of people, infantilization, adultification, fetishization. Like there's so many different prejudice, stereotyping, unconscious bias, having to code switch. So all those range of factors are predominantly on our backs and in our minds daily, and we have to navigate that space to be safe from these factors or to avoid them or just to have to deal with them. So in everyday life you're getting bombarded by all these different things psychologically, and you have to deal with it. And then you've got the other part where there's this barrier up where you're dealing with these things, but unconsciously you feel that you can't go and seek help. So it's really everything sort of compounded, your mental health. I mean, as a black person in society, holding it together by yourself is hard work. And if you've also got that barrier up where you're not seeking help, because unconsciously you've been primed not to seek help, you're already in a really strange predicament where you're at the whim of these forces, and you could end up being sectioned at the worst.
Okay, that's real. What are the biggest myths about therapy in urban communities?
That it doesn't work. You know, some people, they'll go for, especially when they're standoffish from therapy, they'll go for 1 or 2 sessions, don't feel better. It's not working. When therapy's not, it's a long road really. Nothing's a quick fix. It's like going training. We train daily, Nev. You can't go training for 2 weeks or 1 week or 1 month and expect really significant gains in any way, shape or form. So why would you expect that when it comes to a psychological process? You know, you're supposed to see the course. You don't go and to the doctors and they say you've got to take this course of medication and you stop it and expect the infection to clear up.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. So I think generally, you know, accessing therapy is a good thing, but there's this entrenched notion that you shouldn't seek therapy because you can deal with stuff on your own. You know, and you're given really prominent examples. You see black mums deal with so much, you know, on a daily basis, monthly basis, weekly basis, and the only help they get is just them dealing with themselves. You know, because we have this sort of notion that we don't need to go for help, so don't go for help. I think more so in modern times with younger people, therapy's become a thing where, and you know, when you think about therapy and studying it and becoming a therapist, it's like playing golf or playing tennis. It's always been something that's been preoccupied by a different set of people. Black people haven't had the money to access therapy before. They haven't had the money to access courses like that before. It was only a certain section of society that was able to generate the money. It seemed to engage in becoming a therapist or training as a therapist. But more so with the younger generation, there's this new sort of not drive, but this sort of new preoccupation with it's sort of like a status symbol. People say, I'm seeing my therapist. You know, so there's something more uniquely attached to it than back in the day. It's like a sort of a status symbol in some respect.
I wanted to ask you a question, which is funny that you say that. I was going to say, do you think therapy is seen as luxury in the hood? Why or why not?
Yeah, it is. It is because it costs money and it's not cheap. I mean, if you're lucky enough to find charity organisations that can give you reduced rates on the therapy they're going to provide for you, then you're laughing. And there's quite a few places out there that do that. But generally, you're looking at 50, 60, 70, 100, 120 pounds every 50 minutes. You know, to be able to do that once a week. It's not easy, especially when you come from deprived areas and your wages aren't cutting it in regards to paying out an extra expense.
Can talking to a therapist ever replace the role of talking to your brethren? Why or why not?
Yeah, I mean, talking to your brethren is really nice. Especially if you've got friends that are they operate as a soundboard and they can demonstrate that sort of neutrality or transparency that you need. But usually that doesn't happen. Everyone's got an opinion. People feel for you.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking to Neville about something, I say, "Oh, my missus is like, oh yeah, why is she doing that already?" We're getting into a place where you're sort of half dictating what direction I go in.
Yeah.
And then I start, there's this thing called projective identification. So now you've demonstrated that sort of emotional state that's projected into me. And where before I was sort of solemn and feeling upset about the state that my relationship is with my missus, you've come with this sort of aggy type of energy projected into me, and now I'm raising up. That's not the role of a therapist. Being neutral and being able to listen and not influence how you're feeling is part of that role. So with friends, I've always got their opinions. They project that into you. It becomes something different. So and now instead of them being a listening ear, they've actually influenced you into maybe going home that night and saying, all right, it's over. When it's not that situation. No therapist is supposed to be taking you in a direction where they half dictate what the outcome is going to be in regards to the situation that you're in. So friends, they can advise, but most of the time their opinions will be quite detrimental to your decision making in the end. Even though they know you and they mean the best for you, the outcomes could be quite severe in the end. And in the end, you might think it's all right, and you might go away and you might finish with your missus, and then afterwards actually realise that that's not what you wanted to do. But because of the advice you'd taken,
it's too late, isn't it? Yeah, you really crossed that line. Yeah, you got to be careful. So how do we differentiate between mental illness and just being under pressure in the ghetto?
Yeah, I think mental illness is sort of life-changing. It's consistent. It's debilitating to the extent that you can't function normally or conventionally in society. So once you see someone over a period of time not being able to do the conventional things like pay a bill or get out of bed for work, look after their children properly, interact with their friends conventionally or normally. I hate using the word normal because everyone's normal sort of different, innit? So on a conventional level, once these things that you usually do quite easily aren't done easily or not done at all, I think you start seeing that there's mental illness apparent in that person. I mean, some people go up and down and they sort of roller coaster ride through depression or anxiety, but it's not so debilitating that they still can't function. Once you're not functioning, and people can see that, hopefully there's people around you that are able to recognise that and point you in a direction of you seeking some help.
How does masculinity in the hood affect men's willingness to seek help?
The construction of masculinity in the hood is such a deep thing. There's so much going on. And it's upsetting that socially, politically, and just historically, our masculinity's been constructed as a consequence of all those factors and the impact of history and how we've been treated, political agendas, and how we're having to attempt to interact socially to be safe and feel okay. So just generally when it comes to the construction of masculinity, you have to think about what a black man represents in society, and to who. So to black people, usually it's a strong guy, a guy that, and this is quite stereotypical, and a lot of it's driven unconsciously because of how we've been conditioned to think of black men, you know. So you're a guy that does well in bed, you're a strong guy, you're assertive, you know, those are the basic things. So in regards to growing up in the hood, if one thing that isn't pushed or promoted really, it is in a certain way, but outside factors sort of have a detrimental effect on how this is supposed to go forward. So in all households that I know in the black community, education's pushed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never known a black household, unless they're on a serious child protection plan and it's so dysfunctional they've not been functioning well for decades. Education's pushed. But there's a point in time where when it starts failing, young people, especially young boys, start gravitating to negative things to reinforce their masculinity, whether it's smoking, fighting, joining gangs. So there is a point in time when if a young black boy loses his interest, because there are factors at work sometimes in institutions that have such a detrimental effect on young black boys that they start drifting away from education. So I can be a young black boy in school and understand that teacher doesn't like me when I go in that lesson. No one else can see it, but I can feel it, and there's outcomes and consequences for that. I can feel the disparity in treatment in school. I can see that when I'm getting told off, it's different, and what I'm getting told off for and the sanction I'm getting is different. So once you start experiencing that as a young black boy and you start going off the rails and you start gravitating towards negative aspects to build your masculinity, that's when there's a slippery slope for you. So for a lot of young people, a lot of young black boys, especially when that's reinforced with programs like Top Boy and films like Blue Story, you start and your general peer group, if they're failing as well, your construction of masculinity is different.
Yeah.
Than the person that's surrounded and immersed in education all the time, or got the family, the mum and dad around. That's always nice when you got that conventional nuclear family where you get the input from the dad and the mum, and you go down that route, but your masculinity isn't so involved in being hard or strong. You know, it's just about your mental and moving forward in your career later on. But that sort of focus on all the bad elements nowadays seems to be where a lot of young people are at. A lot of young black boys are at. Not, you know, you can say that because you'll say a lot of it because we've already been primed through TV and the media to feel there's a lot of it. Because there's not more negative than good around. Especially in regards to the construction of the masculine self. But it feels like that when you live in certain areas. I live in Tottenham, we live in Tottenham. What do you see? What do you hear when you're walking down the street? You know, how are the kids talking? It's not, you know, oh, I can't wait, I'm doing revision tonight for my maths exam. Yeah, I'm talking about weed, yeah, talking about meeting up to do this or that, going to the block, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to meet up with my guys to do this. Like, you don't hear that positive talk. So the whole construction of masculinity is quite difficult for young black boys, especially when messages are coming from every angle, promoting something quite negative.
Yeah. That's right, man. It's very heavy.
Yeah.
That's a very heavy That's a very heavy topic. I think at some point we should look into that a bit more deeper, like masculinity amongst blacks in the hoods and all of that, and in the streets, or just in general.
And then I think the trauma as well. I mean, people have got to understand what black men represented back in slavery. You know, we were breeders. They had like breeding farms for black men.
That's right.
We were the heavy lifters and the workers. We were the guys that were getting abused. We were the ones that were at the centre of the family as the husband, but we weren't the husband. So already there's some real low levels of self-esteem like black men have got anyway.
And you know the interesting thing, as soon as you said that, I just thought of like, you know, like when they started to give out you know, like over here we call it the dole, or you know, the whatever, money to people that, you know, find it difficult to get on their feet and all that from the government. It was as interesting in America. I think they did kind of something similar like that over here, but where, you know, the black man has to be outside of the house to get the care or the support from the government. Well, whilst like you know, when you had the white families in America, you know, the husband could be in the house with them and they will still get the care. So that's as soon as you said that, I kind of just it just kind of merged, like in the sense that they're carrying on tradition. If you see what I'm saying, that they've separated the male and the female, and they've just demasculated them through all sorts of mad trauma.
Yeah.
How do we break the idea that therapy is only there for crazy people in the hood?
I think that idea's is sort of being eroded a lot more nowadays amongst young people. I mean, there's a lot of people suffering from depression and anxiety, low levels as well, and seeking help because experience something on its onset of depression or onset of anxiety. If you start experiencing certain feelings that you're not used to. Now, I think young people are more likely to move in a direction where they seek therapy. I think it's good that there are parents of a certain age that are in the know, should I say, and have accepted therapy and passed down the idea to their children that maybe later on in life that's an option for you. I think me and my missus both, as therapists, promote that in our family, you know, especially when it comes to your own well-being and looking after yourself mentally. But I think people are more clued up nowadays, and there's a lot of signposting going on, and social media has a lot going on that sort of promotes your own individual well-being. So I think it's a lot better than back in the day. There still could be more acceptance of it, but I think it's got a lot better than it has been.
Pause for 1 sec. It's starting to get a bit warm in there for me. Yeah, so I want to sorry, man. It's been a while, and I'm not used to that heat lifting me out. All right. Are there cultural gaps between therapists and inner city clients that make therapy less effective?
Yeah,
oh my God, what on earth?
That was beautiful. The way that came in.
All right. Yeah, so...
You want to say that one again?
Yeah, let's do that again. Are there cultural gaps between therapists and inner city clients that make therapy less effective?
I think it depends on the individual. Sometimes there's this preconceived notion amongst black people that because you're not a black therapist, you're not going to be able to give me what I need. You can't identify with my cultural norms. You can't identify with the things like how I was brought up, where I come from, even down to basic things like the food I eat.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, there's a sort of slave masters mental conditioning that black people have gone through over time where they envision white people as being superior anyway, unconsciously. So they don't want a black therapist,
Right.
because a black therapist isn't good enough. So they don't, they might experience a black therapist once
Yeah.
and then say, oh, that's enough, I'd rather go with something better and go with a white therapist.
Yeah.
So for me, there's two distinct types of people out there in the black community that operate like that, but some black people actually want to hear and see someone that they identify with in front of them, that makes them feel more comfortable. I've said before that my therapist was sorry Sarah for saying old, but you are were older than me, an older Jewish lady.
Yeah.
That was fine with me. And even in regards to black issues, I talked to her about them, and received a neutral response. She wouldn't go into the intricacies of things, but she still made me think, for me to get to a place where maybe something new was thought about by me. But I think sometimes when you have someone that you can identify with and they talk the same language, sometimes it feels nicer for you.
Yeah.
I've been in a position of thinking about having a black male therapist, and I wondered, it never happened, but I wondered how it would go, and I wondered how our egos would be. I'm still mindful, even as a therapist, that you have to be mindful of your own ego in a room with another black man, because strange things can play out.
Yeah.
So I thought, how would that go? I might be in a situation, a session with another black male therapist, and there might be something uncomfortable going on. You might feel him judging you. You might be judging him. What's he know about me? So I think in the end, there are gaps, but it depends on the individual themselves, how they feel about the therapy, what they want from it, who they feel more comfortable identifying with in that room and in that space.
What are the dangers of untreated trauma in high stress environments like the hood?
Well, like I've said before, I've had 5 friends that they've been sectioned before, doing all kinds of crazy things, from trying to get on an airplane with no money, to running up and down Wood Green High Road with hardly any clothes on, to one in particular that committed a heinous crime. So in the hood itself, how pressurized it is, more pressurized than a pressure cooker to some extent. People are at risk. The everyday person on the street's at risk if someone just loses it, or they're suffering from schizophrenia and hearing voices and someone's talking to them. So yeah, it can be very dangerous, and even so for the families of that family member that's there demonstrating those behaviours. So, and most of the time, it's not identified straight away. A lot of the time, it's identified when it's nearly too late, and that person's ready to be sectioned, or they've done something to someone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a very dangerous situation indeed.
How can therapy be made more relatable to people who grew up in poverty or violence?
I don't know if it can be made more relatable. I think already for people that come from poverty, we're quite judgmental. I think sometimes when someone's sitting in front of you that looks very well dressed and you come for your first session, that can already disturb you into thinking, how's this person going to identify with me?
Yeah.
Again, I think it's down to the individual being open-minded and understanding, regardless of how a person looks in front of you, they're here to care for you. And I say that, care for you, they're taking you on a journey of a resolve, psychological resolve, to resolve certain things that are going on in your head, and get you to a better place. If you go in that room based on that premise, you won't care about how they look or if they've got a posh upper class, what you consider to be upper class voice.
Yeah.
Just understand that that person's been trained to take you on a journey of well-being. You know, I think to say that you can do something better for people in poverty, you'd have to reconstruct therapy in a particular way, and I think it's unnecessary. You know, yeah, the person is there, and with their training, they, especially if they're adhering to the ethical rules and the codes, they're there and they should be able to do a good job for you. You know, if you fit, because not every client and every therapist fit. There is this unconscious fit that I've come across, that they talk about. Even with my clients, I've got clients of two particular cultures that seem to stay with me, and that's their fit with me.
What role do drugs and alcohol play in masking mental health issues in these communities?
Yeah, I mean, addiction because of trauma is widespread, and you can seem like you're functioning okay, especially if you're not overindulging in things like drink or cannabis or whatever, and you're just doing it consistently. Yeah, they've got the teacher or the nurse or the doctor that will have a drink every night on a regular basis and not get drunk, but they are consistently drinking, and they'll seem all right, but that's their coping. That's what they use for coping, and you wouldn't even be able to notice it. And years down the line, when they're in hospital and there's something wrong with their liver, and even though they seem to be mentally all right, take the drink away and see what happens. And it was only 1 or 2 drinks a night.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of the time, especially with things like cannabis, and because that's become so normalized in society, do people think that people that are smoking cannabis as a form of relaxation or stress relief aren't going through something? Of course they are.
Yeah.
Even though it seems to be a passive practice, it's a consistent practice, and there's a reason for it. All right, there's this habitual element where you've been smoking for so long, you consistently smoke. But what's it doing for you when you come home from work? What's it doing for you at the end of the night after you've had a lot to deal with? It's doing something, you know.
Right.
But then it becomes a catch-22 situation, because the more you're smoking, the more it's having a detrimental impact on your cognitive abilities and how you function. And it may be really slight and no one may not notice it, but you know yourself. And if you're aware enough, it may lead you to a path of, all right, I'm going to stop. And if you're not aware enough, or you're so addicted, you'll just continue until later on it may spiral into something else.
Can spirituality or religion be a substitute for therapy, or should they work together?
I think that it can for some people. Again, it's very subjective. I've seen people go through really serious levels of grief and not have any therapy, and their religion has been the support system for them. While they're going through those different levels of grief, from the beginning to the end, whether it's reading the good book or getting support by their church and the local community that's in the church, they've been able to ride that grief and come out the other end. And I think more so if you've got a strong foundation in the church or in religion or in faith of any kind, that's really really beneficial. I don't think to jump onto something just randomly and say, I'm going to turn to religion now, and you haven't got that strong foundation, it's not going to work in the same way. But I think for some people, religion can work really well. For some people, therapy can work really well. And for some people, both can work really well. sometimes some people that are religious may feel that they won't need therapy because all they need is God and the Lord. But if it works for them,
That's right. It works, isn't it? How important is representation, having black or culturally competent therapists for people in the hood?
yeah, I think, even though I spoke earlier about having anyone in front of you, I think there are, and it doesn't matter where you go, I could be criticised for having my own views right here, but it doesn't matter what industry you go into, you're always going to find something different in regards to the treatment of black people, and to some extent maybe a slight misunderstanding. So there's a lot of literature about therapists' experiences, black therapists' experiences, and client experiences, and being treated differently or being felt like they're being treated differently as a professional or a client. So for me, it's really important. I mean, I've got a real vested interest on black issues generally. I think when you do a lot of reading, it's funny because doing a lot of reading, you can be naive as a black person in society and operate pretty well. I'm going off the question a bit, but I'll continue. And you could be a person that reads a lot, and you can also function very well, but it's also has a traumatizing effect. I know a lot of black people that don't like to read about black history because it upsets them quite a lot. But when you read about the disparity in treatment in regards to white doctors and the treatment of black people and how many black people die at the hands of white doctors, when you read about black people applying for jobs and the science of racism, Keon West is a great book where they show numerous studies where black people, they change their names and do the research and assign black names to people that are applying for jobs and white names, and between 50 to 90% less callbacks black people get. Whether you're 9 to 24 times more likely, depending on the area, likely to get stopped by the police, is a thing. In education, higher levels of suspensions, apart from Roma gypsy kids that are at the highest end, the next are black kids. So, there's a lot to contend with, and a lot of disparity going on in society. So to be able to be supported by someone that has an understanding of these sort of negative aspects of society that sort of we have to deal with is a beautiful thing, where they can care for you in a particular way in a session, especially if they know that you're a person that's aware of these things. I don't think you should have a therapist, counsellor, or whatever that brings that to the forefront if you don't know and start saying to them, oh, I wonder if you know about systemic racism, and then create a situation out of nothing, But if you've got someone that's got an understanding, especially when you're expressing your feelings about not getting a job or being treated differently in hospital or being stopped by the police on the road, if someone can help you travel down a road where you have an understanding of how to cope with that better because of their knowledge, then I think that's great.
What are some real life barriers, like cost, location, stigma, that keep people from seeking therapy?
Yeah, the cost is one thing. How far you got to travel is another. But a lot of the time, if you're desperate, should I say, for help, you'll do what's necessary. I know people that will travel for miles for therapy, especially if they feel their therapist is good. But cost is a big thing. Like I said before, charity organisations, always good. And yeah, if you could get, there's no other, nowadays everything's money.
That's right.
So you're sort of, you're sort of stuck in a position unless you can get an organisation that's giving you for a reduced price. And if you haven't got transport and you've got to travel from somewhere like Hornsey to Barnet, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
But if you look close enough, there are organisations that are close to you. Sometimes you don't even know. I mean, I was renting out a therapy room in Haggerston, and then someone gave me some information, and where I practice at Enfield Counselling and Psychotherapy Services, I can do my private practice at a place just across the road because I was given the information. So sometimes just ask or
right.
just look on the internet.
Can community centres or barbershops serve as healing spaces in the absence of therapy?
Community centres and barbershops, I love a barbershop talk. It's so funny because there's elements of black culture that people don't understand how great they are and how cathartic it is. Healing. You could go in a barbershop and be really upset about something, and all of a sudden you come out of the barbershop, especially if you're waiting. I hate waiting and I don't do it. Yeah, but it's something that over the years you do. Yeah. You wait in a barbershop for hours waiting for your trim. 2, 3, 4 customers after you're in the chair. But during that time there'll be people in there that you meet and end up generating some sort of friendships with on a regular basis and having talks about, let me say in layman's terms, the baby mother, your dodgy friends, people talking about criminal activities, people talking about politics, people talk about the law, people talk about psychology, but the barbershop's a deep place which can enlighten and uplift you. And I think a lot of the time you can come out of there and feel good. Community centres are good for that if they're still operating with some really good groups. I mean, they've got community centres that facilitate sessions for, say, Somali women or Turkish women or blah blah men or whatever, and have these groups, especially in households where, and I say this lightly, where in some cultures there's a lot of sexism and you haven't got a voice, at least outside of the house. Some people have got a voice, and they can talk about their shared experiences. Even though they may have to go home and deal with the same thing, there's a place to offload for them. So, community centres and the barbershop, I'm upset that I don't, I'm quite intolerant. Sorry.
We're not against rappers, but we are against those thugs.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. It's all right. How can we teach the younger generation that mental health is just as important as physical health?
It's funny because mental health, it's got less of a stigma amongst the young, especially I think nowadays because there's so many different conditions that young people seem to have, neurodiverse individuals, especially in regards to the young, it's off the scale. Whether you got autism or ADHD or there's some conduct disorder or you got borderline personality disorder, whatever it is, there's a lot going on for young people. So I think young people nowadays, they're more clued up and understand that mental health issues. I mean, CAMS is a prime example. There's a lot of young people nowadays that are signposted towards CAMS. Them and their parents have to go for meetings with clinicians, and there's a process more so now than ever that young people understand in regards to getting help regarding their mental health. So I think there's a lot more going on that they understand. There's a lot more conversations. It's promoted a lot more through social media and on TV, that if you're young, please come and contact whoever if you're feeling upset or you've got anxiety or whatever. So I think there's a real, compared to in my day and your day, I think there was nothing ever talked about in regards to getting help for mental health. I think it's really at the forefront of society nowadays for everyone, and including young people.
What's the first step someone in the hood can take if they're struggling mentally but don't trust therapy?
Man, it's hard work. You first seek your friends out, more than likely. But if your friends are full of nonsense and talking rubbish, you're in a tricky predicament there. Ultimately, your family is there, depending on the relationship with your family, if you feel you can talk to them. So really, it's friends, family, or if you're joined to a positive organisation, you know, if you're linked to a gang in any way, you're not going to speak to your gang friends about mental health issues. They're going to see you a certain way and treat you a certain way as a consequence.
Yeah.
Maybe the local church, if you're linked to any religious organisation. But that's a good question. It'd be really hard to find someone that's going to give you that level of support that is going to benefit you in a positive manner.
How can ex-gang members, artists, or influencers be used to promote mental health awareness?
You know, if they're known, that's so powerful. Because young people, they love someone that's known.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on a journey to go into schools at the moment and do some stuff. And I expect my response won't be as good as someone that's very well known in the media. Yeah, they might accept me, but as soon as people know who you are, that's when people get excited, you know. So if you're known, yeah. But through their craft, they can do things that are exciting. Through their music, they can put out music that addresses those things.
Yeah.
You can create workshops through, if you're an artist, drawing stuff. You can create pieces and have workshops where, because the art's therapeutic anyway, you can come and do some artwork. And I mean, I'd done a couple of summers, I was going to my old workplace with my children to some project. And I'm not an artist in any way, shape or form. And I was there doing my little boondocks painting of a bag on a bag. And I was there for a couple hours just in a zone, feeling okay.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever you're doing, whatever your speciality is, you can use that as a therapeutic platform or as a platform to inform.
Definitely. Do you think schools in the hood do enough to support students' mental health?
When you've got over 1,000 students, I'm mindful that people are quite critical of schools, and I can be one of those persons that could criticise schools all the way, especially after working inside, or working in education for over 20 years. But if you haven't got a real understanding of the dynamics of school and what it takes to educate over 1,000 children in one space, then you'll be the biggest critic. Now, you can't have, with less staff than students in a building, the ability to accommodate for every single child that is got some sort of mental health issue. Some are going to get lost in the gaps, the ones that maybe are doing very well academically and in regards to their behaviour, but they're cutting themselves on the sly. That person will get bypassed. You know, there's some young people that are so dysfunctional that really they're just sort of bounced from pillar to post through permanent exclusion or managed moves. So they get overlooked. They just seem to be naughty children unless they're demonstrating certain behaviours where they've been tested. They've got EHCP and they've been referred to an educational psychologist and some sort of assessment's been done. So there'll be a lot of young people that will miss out, and then there'll be some that will get the help. But then what do you do when CAMS, because that's the main place young people go to, have got a 2-year waiting list? What happens next? And you haven't got money to get any private work done.
It's a downhill spiral, man.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of people, unless you've got money nowadays, there's a lot of young people waiting, a lot of families waiting unless they've got the money to get some private help. You're sort of stuck.
Last question, and this is to those that are watching there as well. If someone from the ends wanted to try therapy today, what would you say to encourage them?
I mean, I've said it before. There's one thing I always say, you know, it's like food. You don't want to try that food. Years later, you try it, it's nice. Just have a taste. Don't take it for granted that it's going to be a quick fix. You have to engage with it. I wouldn't say any less than 6 months to a year to see that start working. Love yourself enough to engage in that process.
Yes.
Because you've got to take a leap of faith for you. You've got to bet on yourself rather than anyone else. If you're not functioning well, everything around you doesn't function well.
That's right.
Yeah, so just think about yourself first before anything else. And take time out to care for yourself in the best way.
Proper. Yes, my brother. Once again, love.
Hey yo, what's outside is within. The mind regulates the hand that masters the pen. The pen is mightier than the sword, but the tongue is mightier still. The stargate to the mind's revealed. The vortex.